You will probably not think twice about who you are attracted to and who you are not. But somewhere in your brain, a very old decision was already made for you. Long before you had opinions. Long before you understood anything about relationships. Long before anyone explained the rules. Your brain quietly looked at the siblings around you when you were very small, ran a calculation you were never aware of, and switched certain things off. Permanently. And that silent calculation may be one of the oldest programs running inside the human body. Because here's the question nobody asked directly. Did ancient humans know that siblings should not mate? No genetics. No science. No doctors explaining chromosomes. No textbooks. Just people living in the wild, trying to survive, with no way to see inside a cell. And yet, in every civilization ever discovered, on every continent, across every era of human history, the same rule kept appearing. Do not reproduce with your close family. How do they know? First, you need to understand what inbreeding actually does. Because the biology is specific. Every human carries 2 copies of most genes. One from each parent. Some of those variants are harmful. They cause disease, developmental problems, weak immune systems. But in most people, the harmful variant is quietly paired with a healthy one. The healthy version does the work. The harmful one stays hidden, silent. When 2 unrelated people have a child, the odds of both carrying the exact same hidden harmful variant are low. When 2 siblings have a child, they share roughly 50% of their DNA. The odds of both carrying the same hidden harmful variant go up dramatically. And if the child inherits 2 copies, one from each parent, there's nothing healthy to cancel it out. It expresses fully. Across one generation, you might see nothing obvious. Across several generations of close relatives reproducing together, the damage accumulates. Higher rates of childhood disease, lower fertility, shorter lifespans, weaker immune responses. The genetic load builds quietly, like a debt that compounds silently in the background until one day the whole system collapses. Modern science explains this clearly. Ancient humans had none of it. So how did the rule still exist everywhere? The answer does not start with a law. It does not start with religion. It does not start with a wise elder sitting the tribe down for a difficult conversation. It starts with something far simpler. Childhood. In the 1890s, an anthropologist named Edward Westermarck noticed something that nobody took seriously for decades. People who were raised together from early childhood almost never developed romantic attraction toward each other, even when they were not biologically related at all, even when there was no rule against it, even when nobody told them not to. He proposed that there was a window in early childhood, roughly the first few years of life, during which close daily contact with another person quietly switched off future attraction toward that person. Not through teaching, not through shame, not through punishment, just automatically, silently, the way your heart beats without you deciding to beat it. People dismissed it for years. It sounded too convenient, too easy. Then the evidence started arriving. The clearest proof came from Israel. On Israeli kibbutzim, children from completely different biological families were raised together in communal groups from infancy. Not siblings, not related at all, but same dormitories, same daily life, constant contact from the very first years. Researchers expected that when these children grew up, some of them would naturally pair off. They had everything in common. Shared childhoods, familiar faces, years of history together. Almost none of them did. Out of thousands of marriages studied from these communities, the number between people raised together from infancy was nearly 0. The children themselves could not explain it. They did not say it felt wrong. They did not say they were following a rule. They just said the attraction simply was not there. Like trying to feel hungry when you are already full. The feeling was just absent. Biology had already made the decision, years before anyone thought to ask. Then came the evidence from China. In some traditional Chinese communities, a practice existed called Shimpua marriage. A family would adopt a young girl as an infant, raise her alongside their son, and then arrange for them to marry when both came of age. The logic was practical. Raise the future daughter-in-law yourself. Remove the uncertainty. Cement the bond early. But the marriages were consistently troubled. Lower fertility rates. Higher rates of separation. Less satisfaction reported by both partners across every measure researchers tracked. These couples were not biological siblings, but they had been raised as siblings. And the Westermarck Effect had quietly done its work years before anyone expected them to fall in love. Nobody taught these children not to feel attracted to each other. Biology had already handled it before the question even came up. So here's what this means for ancient humans. For most of prehistory, people lived in small bands of 20 to 50 individuals. Close family members grew up together, slept near each other, spent every single hour of every single day in physical proximity. The Westermarck Effect would have silently suppressed attraction between siblings, between parents and children, between any family members who shared those early years of close contact. Ancient humans did not need to understand genetics. They did not need a law. They did not need a priest or a chief or a scientist. The rule was already running in the background, automatically, quietly, the way breathing runs in the background, long before anyone thought to write it down. But biology alone did not cover every situation. Children sometimes got separated from families. Groups merged. Cousins raised apart could meet as adults with no childhood proximity and therefore no switched-off attraction. In those gaps, observation started to matter. Ancient humans were extraordinary observers of pattern. Survival depended on it entirely. Which plants made you sick? Which water source caused people to die? Which behaviors led to bad outcomes over time? You do not need to understand germ theory to notice that drinking from a certain river tends to kill people. You do not need to understand genetics to notice that certain kinds of unions tend to produce children who do not survive, who are sickly, who struggle in ways that other children do not. Over many generations, those patterns would have been visible, not explained correctly, but noticed, remembered, passed forward as warnings wrapped in story and ritual and taboo. The rule could emerge from accumulated observation without anyone ever understanding the mechanism behind it. Something bad keeps happening here, so we do not do this anymore. That was enough. There was also a reason that had nothing to do with biology at all. In small ancient bands, pairing only within the immediate family meant the group closed in on itself. No new alliances, no connections with neighboring groups, no exchange of food, knowledge, or people. In prehistoric life, connections between groups were not a luxury. They were survival infrastructure. Bad hunting season? You needed allies who would share food. Disease swept through your band? You needed outside help. Population dropped too low? You needed to merge with another group. Groups that reproduced only within themselves were isolated groups. And isolated groups in the prehistoric world were fragile groups that tended not to survive long enough to pass anything on. Groups that exchanged partners with outsiders built webs of obligation and mutual support that could absorb disasters. They outlasted the closed groups. Their rules spread. Their prohibitions spread with them. The incest taboo may have been, at least in part, a social technology, a mechanism that forced human groups to stay connected to the wider world instead of collapsing inward. So did ancient humans know that siblings should not mate? Knowing is the wrong word. They did not know the way we know now, with studies and data and genetic evidence and scientific consensus. But something more interesting than knowing was happening. Their biology was quietly suppressing attraction between people raised in close childhood contact. Their observation, accumulated across generations, was flagging patterns of harm without understanding the mechanism. Their survival instincts were pushing groups outward toward alliances instead of inward toward isolation. And their storytelling minds were encoding all of it into myth and taboo and law that would outlast the original observations by thousands of years. The rule existed at every level simultaneously, in the body, in the community, in the story, in the law, not because one person figured it out, because the groups that stumbled toward the rule survived long enough to pass it on, and the groups that did not slowly and quietly disappeared. And here's the part worth sitting with. The exhaustion that modern parents feel trying to raise children alone, without a village, without a network of hands. That is what it feels like when you try to do something your body was never designed to do alone. The same logic applies here. The incest taboo did not require genius. It did not require a moment of conscious insight or a great philosophical breakthrough. It required enough generations of quiet biological filtering, enough accumulated pattern recognition, enough groups reaching outward instead of closing inward. The rule was right, but not because anyone reasoned their way to it, because the ones who followed it survived, and the ones who survived taught it to their children, who taught it to their children, who eventually, after thousands of years, taught it to you. You did not figure this out. You inherited it from people who never understood it either, but followed it anyway. And somehow, across hundreds of thousands of years, that was exactly enough.